He used to be known as the Fat Controller, but since he's lost 4 stone, we can no longer call him that. He's now the medium-sized controller. Not the same ring.
Thank you.
I hope you all enjoyed your breakfast. I shall now call on our guest speaker, Andrew Lansley, the Right Honourable Leader of the House of Commons, Lord Privy Seal.
Thank you very much, Bob. Thank you very much. And Member of Parliament for South Cambridge, which is most important in this context. Thank you very much. Do call us Right Honourable. They generally, when they say that, say, but you have to remember that you're not necessarily honourable and not often right. So it's a bit like this thing of Lord Privy Seal. I said, well, I'm not a lord. I'm not a seal, or at least, and I kind of hope I'm not a privy. But I tried to find out what being Lord Privy Seal actually entails. It's been around since 1350 or something. As far as I can see, it consists of, she gives you the seal, Her Majesty gives you the seal, you put it in your safe, and when you lose your job, you give it back. It's a bit like, the seal is almost like a P45. No, I am your Member of Parliament, if you're in South Cambridgeshire, which I gather from your short introductions, you pretty much all are. Some of you will realise that not only do Sally and the family and I live over in Orwell, but we used to live in Melbourne, in Little Lane in Melbourne. So we know, for example, a few folks.
Where I live.
Is that right?
I'm opposite where you used to live.
Well, it was lovely living there, and we very much enjoyed it. It's only kind of a growing family that meant we couldn't stop in the in Little Lane. It was lovely, but it did give us the opportunity, not least, to visit leeches on a regular basis. I could do the whole thing. I'll tell you this though, I do remember when I was visiting leeches back then, and I looked at, there's a thing that the government produces through the Meat Hygiene Inspectorate called a HAS score, which is a hygiene score on abattoirs. And I remember looking at this thing, and the best in the country was leeches of Melbourne. In the whole top men and women they are there. But anyway, from my point of view, what I want to talk about briefly, but then give you a chance perhaps to say a few things to me as well, because one of my jobs is to represent you, and what that means, I think, is I need to know, and it's helpful to know from you, some of the things which are most important to you, some of your frustrations and obstacles, so that we can try and support you in business. Because from our point of view, you know where we are as a country. We've got terrible debts. We've got to earn our way out of this. Can't just carry on. You can't, the response to having too much, even the financial advisors amongst us will say, unless you've got some fantastic investments, if you've got a shed load of debt, the thing you can't afford to do is to carry on borrowing, because that way lies disaster. You've got to earn your way out of it. And we're on the earn out at the moment, and it's long and it's tough. It's very difficult. The government isn't spending more than we plan to spend, but the revenue isn't yet coming in, and we're getting an awful lot of international trouble. But earning out is about, sometimes it's about big businesses, it's about, like TTP and earning in the international marketplace. You'd be amazed how many businesses that start with a local perspective rapidly are able to go regional, national and international. Remember, the business that succeeds is the business that can access the maximum number of potential customers, which of course means it depends on the character of your business, but for many businesses, exporting is absolutely essential if you're going to get to all the customers that you want to get to. But different businesses have different requirements, and what we need to do is to make sure that we can support all of those businesses as best we can. What it does mean is, and I can remember, because before I was a Member of Parliament, I was Deputy Director General of the British Chambers of Commerce. So in a way, the getting together of the business community is a thing that I've been involved in for many years. And I do remember, mostly when we talked to the business community about what they wanted from government, it was for government to get out of the way. It was the amount of regulation that was coming in and causing a lot of time and difficulty and cost. Well, we've been trying hard. Over these last 2.5 years, we've actually cut the cost of regulation to business by £350 million in total. Well, £350 million sounds like a big number. I'm afraid this is probably less than 1% of the total cost of regulation to business. We've got a long way to go. So really what we've done so far is we've stopped it growing, but now we've got to try and bring it down again. And there may be a few amongst you who say, well, hang on a minute, it doesn't feel quite like that yet. And one of the reasons is because actually half the regulation we have on business in this country comes from the European community. And of course we don't control that to the same extent, and we can't stop that and reduce it in the same way unless we can get others to come along with us. So that's part also of what we have to do over these next 2-3 years, is to get that new settlement with Europe that allows us to say to Europe, no, there are aspects of regulation which actually get in the way of Britain and Europe being able to compete internationally. We've got to reduce that too. But for small businesses, businesses with fewer than 10 employees, we've got the exemption. No new domestic regulation on new businesses till April 2014, a 3-year exemption. So you should be able to say, look, if somebody's saying to you there's a new regulation, you should be able to say, no, I'm a small business, I have fewer than 10 employees, you shouldn't be doing that to me. In health and safety, as you know, there's the April this year, there's the new exemption coming in.
Brilliant. Yeah, made it so much easier.
Right, so we've got a few of these things, we need more. So suggestions in terms of getting that. Those of you who are doing accountancy will know that for small businesses, quite a big reduction in the extent to which small businesses are having to file accounts in the same way that they used to have to do. So cutting back on regulation, absolutely essential, and it's always useful to know what are the regulations that clearly from your point of view get in the way, serve no purpose. Second thing is you have to have access to finance. I know it's Steve, isn't it? Our banker, well done. Nice to see Barclays here. I remember when we were fighting to keep Barclays in the village. Those days are unfortunately gone. You know, access to finance, it's a real frustration. And you probably heard us saying, look, hang on a minute, it feels like we're pushing on the proverbial piece of string. You know, the bank keeps pushing money out there, the government's put money into the funding for lending scheme, and still actually lending to small businesses isn't going up. So what's that all about? What is that happening? And people from the big banks will tell you, well, actually it's because we've got to build our balance sheets, we've got to put money away, we've got to kind of build up our capital. So it's very difficult to take on risk, and everybody's become risk averse. Well, unfortunately, risk is the business we're in. If you don't take risks, you don't prosper. There's no such thing, frankly, is there, as a safe business. I remember when I was with my one of my friends at the Chambers of Commerce, we were going to visit about 15 years ago, 20 years ago probably. We were visiting the Department of Trade and Industry, and he went there and he sat there at this meeting, and the civil servants, I can say this because I used to be one of them, the civil servants were sitting there explaining to him what small businesses ought to do, and he kind of came out of this thing. And we were going down the street afterwards, and he started to berate me and said, if they get it wrong, he said, they mostly get pushed sideways or occasionally promoted. If I get it wrong, the car goes, the house goes, the children's future goes, everything goes. They don't understand. I take the risks, and it's that mentality. You know, that's what business is all about, and that mentality is one we have to understand and support. And that business, including, frankly, from banks and the new banks coming through and the the finance for lending, people have to understand that you can't walk into an office with the banks and say, look, you know, I'm taking a risk, and they say, well, we're not supporting risk. Risk is what you have to support if we're going to succeed. So export is important, and the UK TI, we put a lot of support now behind UKTI to work with the Chambers of Commerce, in particular my old friends at the Chambers of Commerce are trying to get. So we've got more support for trade missions, more support for understanding what the international markets look like through market research internationally and so on, and supporting through export credit finance when people are going abroad. We've got to cut regulation, we've got to support finance. But most of all, we've got to think about getting the skills through, I think. Because when you look at when I talk to many businesses, what they say is really makes the difference is that they've actually got particularly the young people coming through, the workers who've got the skills and the attitude. And I'm delighted we've got the Village College here this morning, because I think actually that relationship between the business community and education is absolutely vital. And it's not just the actual skills, although that's important, the ability to, to add up and write a decent letter or email, to be able, but actually it's the attitude. It's the fact that youngsters will turn up in the morning, want to learn, be disciplined, do the job, and frankly, most businesses I've talked to, when we had that period of kind of lots of people coming in from Poland and Eastern Europe, and I said to companies, why, we've got young people who are unemployed, why are you not employing them? We've actually got nearly 1 million young people who are not in work and looking for work. And they said, well, actually, it's fundamentally, it's attitude. Because we train, and there is support. There's apprenticeships, there's traineeships coming through, there's lots of skills opportunities. We would train people if we were absolutely confident that they had the right attitude, that they would stick to it, that they would do what you ask and be there and were willing to learn and to adapt. So that relationship with young people as they come through, I think, is absolutely critical to make that happen. Final thing I want to talk about is locally, of course. And they say in politics, all politics is local, and in a way, all business is local too. If you haven't got the infrastructure, how can you really make it all work? You need broadband, you need roads that you can actually drive down and hope to get where you want at the time that you want to. You've got to have a railway system that works fantastically. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you.
As a commuter out of Royston, it's got to be, hasn't it? I'll say this. First Capital Connected. I travelled to London, and the course of last year, I think I must have done it however many 100 and something times, and probably in 99% of times it went fine. There was the one occasion when I was going to the cabinet meeting that the Queen was coming to.
Murphy wrote a law about it.
First time since Queen Victoria that Her Majesty had come to a cabinet meeting. I'm down at Royston, I'm from Orwell, I'm down at Royston, and it's 7:10, and it's quite a bad day, but they say, get on this train. I became insufferably familiar with Letchworth Garden City. Because the lines all went down at Hitchin, you remember that day?
Yeah.
That was a bit of a shocker.
I've tried to forget it, but I do remember it.
A bit of a shock. So, but you rely upon it, don't you? You rely upon the infrastructure, and even more so if it works 100 times and then it goes out the 101st. But getting that infrastructure right, and you know what we need locally. We do need that broadband, and last Monday was the County Council announced the contract to BT to be the providers for connecting Cambridgeshire, and I guess I hope some of you have been kind of joining up for that to say that you want to be broadband your customers for this. But what we're looking for is across the whole of Cambridgeshire, I think something like a 90% super fast broadband coverage by 2015. So that will make an enormous difference, because I know, in the evening, because Sally, my wife, runs a business from home, and if she's, during the evening in particular, if she's trying to do research or something, or send documents, it just drops out because everybody comes home and they're all on and the capacity isn't there, and it's only 2 megs in the first place, and then you try to keep dividing it up as more people come on. It just can't work. We can't be like this. We're a European, international centre around Cambridge and in South Cambridgeshire. We've got to be one of the best places in the world to do business. But actually, we can't really support businesses properly in this modern age if you can't be sure that you've got really fast broadband access to get you anywhere in the world when you want to get there. So those are some of the things we're aiming for. You will have other things that, from your point of view, you think are important for me as your Member of Parliament to be pursuing. The other me as Leader of the House of Commons and Lord Privy Seal in the Cabinet, we collectively are trying to do.